So Lincoln had suspended habeas corpus, specifically in Maryland, this border state that had slaves but wanted to stay out of the war and kind of didn't want the war to happen. In Baltimore, when Lincoln called up all the militias and said, hey, Maryland, you also have to send your state militia to help us serve in the Union Army. And some militia members, they're marching through Baltimore toward DC. And then there are anti-war protesters. Again, when I say anti-war protesters, don't picture like 1960s hippies, picture like Confederate sympathizers who want to be able to keep their slaves. A riot occurs. Lincoln has to send down like Union Army members. This is actually the cause of the first deaths of Union soldiers in the Civil War, is here in Baltimore, subduing this protest. As a result, Lincoln continues to suspend habeas corpus. Keep in mind, even though Roger B. Taney has already said, nope, this is unconstitutional, it has to be done by Congress, Lincoln's like, well, you know what? We're in the middle of the war and Congress is not in session, so I'm throwing people in prison. He like throws the mayor of Baltimore in prison indefinitely, other like city leadership. Meanwhile, there is a newspaper editor, Frank Key Howard, who's a Confederate sympathizer. He's kind of an anti-war, basically a Copperhead Democrat, right? And he is publishing articles criticizing Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus, which is his right to do, First Amendment. And he gets thrown in prison. Not just thrown in prison, he gets thrown into Fort McHenry, the military fort outside Baltimore, for 14 months. Here's the extreme U.S. history irony to this. Frank Key Howard was the grandson of Francis Scott Key, the guy who literally wrote our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, while watching the bombardment of Fort McHenry, the place where 2 generations later his grandson is going to be imprisoned indefinitely for 14 months. He's then taken across state lines and thrown into prisons in New York and Boston while the war is going on. And just to be super clear, this whole example of Lincoln suspending habeas corpus during the Civil War is considered a stain on his presidential legacy. He is considered by many historians to be one of the, if not the greatest American presidents. And this is always a little asterisk that they have to put and be like, oh, but I kind of wish he hadn't done that. Again, maybe not the very first part. Like, I do understand as a commander in chief, like if people are literally like blowing up bridges and stuff and making it to where your soldiers can't cross, you got to do something when you're in the middle of a war. But throwing writers in prison for criticizing you for doing that, I don't know.